morning. I'm not sure if this one's going to make sense, but I sense and see and observe two different things in just my daily living, which I do feel like I see a lot of people in my everyday life. And I'm observant, so I like to kind of look and see what we're doing here and how I can love people where they are. So I've observed two things around me in my environment of community. And one of them is people are still hurting. And our sermon yesterday at church actually touched on this a little bit. It talks about our vices, coffee, energy drinks, goes so far as even to do other things that kind of get us through the day. And then the reason behind those things, trauma, anxieties, other things, in other words, hurt and suffering. And the other thing I see is God meeting people where they are and changing their life. And I can just speak from my own experience. Years ago, as you all know, I have struggled with anxiety for most of my life. And I wasn't prepared. When you struggle with something like that, it does become just your everyday norm. And with that said, a lot of times it feels like it's never going to end. And I could testify to the fact that it does end in God's timing. And hindsight is amazing, because when I was struggling at my worst, there is no way that I could have seen what my life would be like today, because it did not look anything like that. And truly, it was inner turmoil. So I think I've mentioned before, if you looked at me, you would say, she's still the same person she's always been, just from the outside. You know, when things change or are healed inside, things change in how you treat people, but it doesn't change your look. I mean, you could look healthier, you could look more lively, you could glow, but who you are doesn't change outwardly. What God does, though, and I've seen him doing this as I've observed it in many, many people, and it's not just my community. You hear stories of changed lives, and that's so encouraging, because we've all had a rough couple years, and we can do what we've always known, or God can step in and refine us and heal us from the inside. And what comes out then are the fruits of his work. And I'm not going to take credit for the work that God did when he healed me from anxiety. And truly, I had no idea what was coming. And it was ugly before it was better. But the process of healing me, he truly healed me from the inside. And to this day, there are still some habits that I had from all my years of anxiety, but my perspectives are different. The way I treat others is different. I've learned so much about myself, because I believe that God gave me the gift of vulnerability, and he used that to help me in the long run. Because I'll tell you something, if you're running from your problems, or if you're just trying to survive your days, the truth is, God could do what he did for me, where he steps in unexpectedly. But I do think that something truly, he stepped in most likely because I wasn't doing it for myself, because it just went on for so long. And my perspectives and my thought life were just so off. And that's what anxiety will do. It'll make you kind of believe things about yourself that aren't true. It makes you believe things about your environment that aren't true. And the more you think like that, the more habits that come. And it's really, really, really hard to see through, what's that saying, see the forest through the trees. I think that's kind of what anxiety will do to your mind. But it's not just anxiety. It's living with traumas and that you don't address, or it's living or in bad company, for instance. Proverbs tells us bad company corrupts good character. So we do become products of what we're around, but we also are products of our thought life. And like I've said already, God came in and sifted that for me. He shook me up, and I was so grateful. But on the other side, I want to encourage you to look at what's going on inside. Really look at it. Don't just kind of, I'm going to live with this another day and make the best of it. Start digging in. Start asking yourself those questions. Start praying for guidance. I started doing that later along in the process, but I don't see any reason with starting that earlier in your process. Maybe your process won't take as long then to heal. And so, but I am so encouraged by what I see. Yes, there's a lot of hurt and a lot of suffering and a lot of skewed perspectives, because like I said, when you're hurting, your perspectives are a certain way. So with that said, God is on the move and he is, believe it or not, he's got our youth in him, in his heart. And that's so amazing and so exciting to see. I could give you stories, but there are just too many, and I'm trying to think if there's even just one that I could. Do you remember, actually, maybe it was I think it was about a year ago, there was a college that started with a worship service. They have weekly worship services on Wednesdays, I believe. I'm drawing a blank on the name of the college, but that worship service didn't end for a period of, what was it? Did it go on for like a week? At Asbury Chapel, I think it was. That's one example of the types of things that I've seen God doing. The Spirit was present there, and there was a worship service that didn't end, and more people were able to come and be a part of it. And that can happen in everyday places. I think that's the coolest thing. And actually, at this point, I'm thinking of all the regular everyday people that were in the Bible that God used. They had messy lives and messy hearts, and they, seemingly shouldn't have been in God's good graces because of the things they had done. Many of us could look at those things and think, man, that was really bad. But God used those people to do his work. And I don't think hearts change from good times. And I know nobody likes to suffer. And some suffering seems just unimaginable. But something that comforted me during the times where our community was suffering, God's not surprised by anything. And he does call us to turn from our rebellious ways and disobedience. He tells us to turn from that. And he tells us to seek him and obey his commands and fear him and get to know him. His character is not like our character until he begins the work that we need in us. And then what comes from that, though, and down the line, sometimes you are going and going and going, and you're thinking you're giving the best you have, and you're loving people that are hard to love, and all of these things, and it can be exhausting, truly exhausting. But think down the road, what you're doing today, doing those good things, that's bound to have a good effect. And we don't know when, we don't know all the details of timing, but what we do know is, I believe it's Galatians, it says, do not grow weary in doing good, for in due time you will reap the harvest. And what that tells me is, whatever today looks like, you're not going to hurt yourself by loving others and by figuring out what's going on inside that's causing so much upheaval in your heart. Because truly, your heart is where it's at. We can throw on all sorts of actions. We can make ourselves look a certain way, but that doesn't deal with the root of who you are and what you're experiencing. And once you deal with that root, you're freed up to do more of what God is actually asking you to do. Because I'll tell you, the things that we struggle with, Satan will definitely use those as a distraction from doing good things, and we don't want that. We don't want our lives to be a reflection of our distractions. We want our lives to be reflective of Christ living in us and doing what he does, which is perfection, perfect work. He can do that. We don't do the perfect work. We just open ourselves up and ask him to do his good work. Create in me a clean heart, O Lord. Create in me a clean heart. I'm going to end on that one. Have a great day.